Today is July 16th, 2020. My name is Dana Yarrick. I'm interviewing Sandy Lopez for the Latino Oral History Project, Voces of a Pandemic project at the Center for Latino and Latin American Studies at Northern Illinois University. This project is in partnership with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Please know Ms. Lopez that this interview will be placed in the Northern Illinois University Libraries and shared with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. If there's anything you do not wish to answer or talk about, I will honor your wishes. Also, if there's something you do want to talk about, please bring it up and we'll talk about it. Because we are not conducting this interview in person, I need to record you consenting. So I'll ask you a series of 6 questions. Please say, yes, I agree, or no, I do not agree after each one. There are several questions we need to make sure you agree to before we go on. The Center for Latino and Latin American Studies wishes to archive your interview, along with any other photographs or other documentation, at the Northern Illinois University Libraries. Northern Illinois University Libraries will retain copyright of the interview and any other materials you donate, excuse me, to the Center for Latino and Latin American Studies at Northern Illinois University. 1. Do you give the Center for Latino and Latin American Studies consent to archive your interview and your materials at the Northern Illinois University Libraries?
Yes.
Do you grant Northern Illinois University Libraries right, title, and interest in copyright over the interview and any materials you provide?
Yes.
Do you agree to allow Northern Illinois University Libraries to post this interview on the internet where it may be viewed by people around the world?
Yes.
Do you grant the Center for Latino and Latin American Studies consent to share your interview and your materials with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin for inclusion in the Voces of a Pandemic Oral History Mini Project, which will include posting the interview on the internet?
Sorry, I jumped the gun, but yes.
Okay. We have many questions in a pre-interview form that we have already filled out. We use that information from the pre-interview form to help in research. The entire form is kept in a secure Voces server at the University of Texas at Austin. Before Voces sends it to the Benson Library and NIU libraries, we would have stripped out any contact information for yourself or family members, so that will not be part of your public file. Your public file will only be accessible at the Benson Library and NIU libraries. 5. Do you wish for us to share the rest of your interview and your public file available to researchers at the Benson and NIU libraries?
Yes.
Finally, on occasion, the Center for Latino and Latin American Studies and Voces receive requests from journalists who wish to contact our interview subjects. We only deal with legitimate news outlets. Do you give consent for us to share your phone numbers or your email with journalists?
Sure.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about yourself. Who is Sandy Lopez?
Oh, okay. So I am the proud daughter of a borderland mother and an immigrant, first generation Latina. My mother grew up in Laredo, Texas, and my dad migrated from Anahua, Mexico when he was 15. And they were migrant workers and they moved to Chicago Heights. And I was born in Chicago Heights, moved around a bit and then came to NIU as a freshman and never left NIU. I've stayed on NIU since I came onto campus in 1987, graduated with a bachelor's degree in deaf education, went back for a master's degree in instructional technology. I'm currently working on my PhD program and at Illinois State, just because it has an emphasis on leadership, equity, and inquiry, and with a social justice lens, and that's something that I'm very passionate about. I'm also the coordinator for Undocumented Student Support at NIU, a position that I've had since 2018, but I have been advocating alongside undocumented students since 2010. And I first began, I would say I first began advocating for immigrants in 2008. It was February 14th, 2008, a day I remember always because that's the day there was an event on campus, and because that's the day I took my dad to go and renew his immigration, his green card. And that was the time when I saw how horribly he was treated for being an immigrant. And that was the first day I began, in my opinion, advocating for immigrants and people I care about. I'm a mother. I'm a mother, a wife, an owner of a dog that is crazy and I love. I'm very passionate about education and students. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm very passionate about education and students and making sure that we provide resources to communities, students, and parents. It's something that I think is so important, not just for our Latino students or, our community, but for all students. And NIU being a first generation college really helped me in my path as I went on to get my degree. So I guess educator, family member, activist, I think those are all good phrases for me.
All right. Since you just mentioned it, can you elaborate a little bit on the experience with your dad trying to renew his residency?
Yeah, we had gone in. It's interesting because I don't know if I have it here. My father, his dad actually was born in the United States, in Bryan, Texas. And my dad came, my abuelito, he went back to Mexico to be a farmer. They had ejidos, community farms, and he went back. He was born in the US, went back, and then got married and had all his children in Mexico. And when my father came over at the age of 15, he came in as a legal permanent resident. My father never adjusted his status, even though he married my mother, who was a US citizen. And when we went to renew his card, his green card, my father also had a record. He had, he had some charges filed against him. So it became a bit more complicated. And when we went in, my father had just been recovering from prostate cancer. He was hard of hearing at the time. And for some reason, my dad could hear me in Spanish or could understand me in Spanish better than he could in English. And I think I know why. That's because it's his first language. So I was translating for him. And the woman kept getting angry and saying, does he speak English? He should speak English. He's been here long enough. And I said, yes, he does. He does speak English, but he can't hear very well. And for some reason, he hears me better in Spanish than in English. So I'm just translating. Well, he can understand me. I don't need you to translate. And it was so hard because my dad looked really frail. He had just been recovering from his cancer. And he would look up at me and I was like, oh, I was so angry. I remember I was so angry. I had to go in the bathroom. I was like, oh, I'm going to go in the bathroom. I'm going to throw water on my face. Because if I don't, I'm going to jump across his desk and just grab this woman. And that's really how I felt. It was the first time I ever felt so enraged at someone like that. And it was the first time in my life where I felt completely powerless. And there's times as a child and, things have happened where I've hit obstacles, but this is the first time where I ever saw how someone could have complete power over you. And so I remember going in the bathroom, washing my face, and I came out and I told my dad, trágatela, just eat it. I said, trágate esta mierda, because we're going to have to eat this shit sandwich. We're going to be dealt. And I said, and then afterwards, papi, I'm going to take you out for a really good meal to wipe this taste out your mouth. And my dad was like, oh, he laughed. And I said, okay, we're just going to have to play this game. And so then that's when I came out and I was like, okay, what do you need? Blah, blah. And so she made us do all these extra steps. And one of the things she made us do was go to the Markham courthouse, and we had to ride out there and come back. But she only gave me a very short window, which she didn't think I was going to make it there and back. Luckily, I threw my dad in the car. We raced, which I probably could have gotten a ticket, raced to the Markham courthouse. And there was a woman there. And I said, listen, you got to help a sister out here. And it was a woman of color. And she looked at me, she's like, what's going on? I said, I need your help. I need these files. I'm not going to make it in time. They're going to, and I told her my story. She said, don't worry, honey. She went boom, boom, boom. She printed off like a stack full of papers, and she wasn't supposed to, but she did it anyway. So I grabbed the stack, threw my dad back in the car, and we raced back, and we made it in with 5 minutes to spare. And I said, here you go. And she looked at me and she's like, oh, and I said, this is what you needed, right? She said, yeah. I'm like, okay. Well, I don't know. I don't know if I'm be able to do this. I said, well, you have everything you need. And so, my dad just sat there and we took it and she processed it. And by an act of God, we got it renewed for 10 more years. And my dad always cracked up telling that story. He said, "Whoo, thank God I took Sandy, because if I would have taken Corina, I'd be in Mexico." That's my sister, the other one who has a very short temper. And he said, she would have beat her up. I would never got my paperwork. So that was the running joke. Like, thank God I took you, because then I didn't get deported, right? I didn't have a problem. But while we were there as well, I saw her as we were being, she was trying to work with us as people were coming in, other immigrants and immigrants from different countries, not just, Latinx families. She was so mean and so nasty to all of them. And I thought, they don't have anyone there to advocate for them. They don't have anyone there to translate for them. And I felt so bad. And I remember leaving there saying, never again will I sit back and be on the sidelines. And it was that year that I started volunteering and using, up until that point, I was just like, oh, my Spanish is okay, but it gave me pena, right? I was like, oh, I'm not that great. But I'm like, who the hell cares? I'm using it, right? I'm going to use it to advocate and to do what I can. That was the year that I began volunteering at citizenship workshops. That was the year that I became an election judge, because they needed Spanish speaking election judges. And I volunteered and I signed up, and or because of that, I later on went to become an election judge. And then I also started volunteering at these nonprofits that needed Spanish speakers. And that really is when I became, in my opinion, an advocate or started to work alongside organizers.
So you are currently the coordinator of Undocumented Student Support at NIU. Can we start by talking a little bit about Northern Illinois University in DeKalb? What kind of campus is it? And tell us a little bit about the students that you serve.
Okay, so we are located about 50 miles west of Chicago. I think the term I've been hearing is peri-urban. I would say rural, and then someone's like, "Can I challenge you to use peri-urban?" I said, "Sure." So it's a, like I said, it's my alma mater. I'm a proud Husky, and the students that I serve are predominantly, undocumented students. I also have mixed status students, which are US born students with undocumented parents or undocumented family members. And then I also help all Huskies. I honestly, as there's times when I get students who just have funding problems or, just can't make ends meet. And because I advocate alongside undocumented students so much, oftentimes I get students who are not undocumented, but they do need help with financial assistance. And so I help them. I might also add that I did pay for my entire undergrad with all scholarships. I was a work study student. I worked in the dorm, so I got my room and board paid for, but I also paid for everything else via scholarship. So I left NIU with zero debt and zero loan or anything. I didn't owe anything. So I always tell students, if you can qualify for the FAFSA and you get MAP and Pell funding, we're almost there. So I help them in applying. And that's one of the things I've done. I did so well for myself that I share that now with the students that I serve. I have predominantly Latinx students, but I'm seeing an influx, especially this year, with African students coming in, undocumented African students, undocumented Asian students. I have a few undocumented Eastern European students, but I currently have about 14, last I counted was 14 different countries that were represented as far as, undocumented students. And I think my office and the work I do is not just in isolation. I work alongside the Undocumented Student Organization that really can be credited to my position and why I'm here and doing the work that I'm doing. Dream Action NIU is a student organization that was founded in 2009. I wasn't aware of them until 2010, and I did not become their advisor until 2011. It was in 2010 that I sat with them in the Latino Center Smart Classroom as they were reading the DREAM Act. They came up and they were supposed to determine if it was, they were gonna pass it. And it was then that they said that they didn't have enough votes to introduce it. And then later they said that it had failed by 5 votes. And I remember the heaviness in that room with the students that I sat with that I didn't yet know. And I thought, how did this law not pass? How are we not going to support these undocumented students, right? And at the time, I still had a lot to learn about narratives that were being used, about this divisiveness of the term dreamer and how it was used to pit these students as, completely innocent and deserving, and their parents are criminal. And it was later that I learned that this word is so political and so divisive, and it's a word that was given to and not chosen by undocumented youth. And I think, being around undocumented students who later would inform me, like, we don't blame our parents. We're not using that narrative. And I don't use that narrative. I refrain from using that narrative because, there's a lot of systems in place and obstacles that don't make it easy for our undocumented family members to adjust status. And that's something I've learned in the process. So my office helps a lot of people. I'll come back to the original question. Our numbers have fluctuated as a university, but as far as what we offer our students, we offer resources and scholarships and mental health counseling sessions that we put together. There's an office space that I can now proudly boast. I will be having 4 graduate assistants and 1 undergraduate student worker. I am an office of one. But we do a lot of wraparound services. So sometimes students will say, well, you don't have that many undocumented students at NIU. Are you busy? I'm like, yeah, I'm busy. I'm definitely busy with all the laws that are changing and the trainings that we do for faculty, staff, and community members. We are kept very busy in our office and making sure that our students are given equity at their institutions where they pay tuition and fees just like every other student, yet they're faced with obstacles that other students don't face because of their status. So yeah, we definitely keep ourselves busy, and we're excited for what we're going to be doing this year.
So tell us about your how things have changed in your role during COVID-19.
So people say, oh, you must be really slow right now. And I laugh because I've always made myself accessible to students. My position, while it wasn't created until 2018, I had talked about, I started working in 2011 alongside undocumented students. So I've been sort of doing this work unofficially since 2011 with other colleagues. There was a group of us that did the work because there was no position. And we did it oftentimes after hours at home on the weekends. So students, once they knew you were doing this work, they led other students to you. So in that sense, I've always been connected via email, via phone, via text, via social media to undocumented students. And now with COVID, it's just, I'm doing that virtually. Now I'm using Zoom, which I don't know why I never did before, but I'm using more Zoom, Teams, and I'm still connecting with students and family members. There's times when I will Zoom with students and they'll ask me if their parents can hop on. And so we have that opportunity to help and provide resources quickly and share information. That hasn't changed. The thing that's changed is that I don't get to see them, right? There's something with being able to be in person and to be in community with someone. It's a little bit different. It's not that I don't build that rapport with them via a virtual meeting or a phone call, but I like to see the students. I like to have their parents on campus. I like for them to see, like, this is your space, right? This is for you. This is, all we have to offer. So it's changed in that sense. But the one thing that that has been somewhat difficult for me is the fact that our undocumented students are not getting any resources. They're excluded from the stimulus checks. They're excluded from the CARES Act. And the other thing that's really difficult for me as I'm helping my students is I know I'm going to be taxed to try to come up with a lot more funding opportunities for undocumented students because of COVID, because the summer is when our undocumented students are hustling. They're working, they're sometimes 2 or 3 jobs because they know they need that money to go to school and pay off their tuition and fees. Right now, our students are working to survive. Some of them are the only people that are providing income for their family because their parents have been out of work. They're the ones who are having to make house payments and bill payments, and all that money that they would have saved up for school is gone just to survive. So that's a lot of how it weighs on me sometimes to think about how are we going to help this group of students right now make it through the next semester. The university has been wonderful. They have lifted their holds. So if you have a balance, it doesn't prohibit you from registering for the fall semester. It didn't prohibit you for the summer. The problem is that that balance is rising and that balance is getting higher. And how are we going to pay for it when all their funding is going to support themselves and their families right now? So I think that's how it's changed. I've had to get creative as far as how are we going to offer, you know, services and resources or even group meetings. And we've been able to do that since COVID. There's a, what does he say? There's an event that we put on called Coming Out of the Shadows with the Undocumented Student Organization. I assist them. And in the past, it's been very public and in a public forum. And this year we did it via Facebook. We recorded the sessions, we created videos, and we shared it via a Facebook Live event. And then it's still on the student Facebook page so people can see their story or hear and see their stories and their asks of the university. So things have changed in that fashion. Our drive to support undocumented students and to make sure that we are there and that they know they are not alone has not changed. If anything, I feel like that drive or that it has been heightened for me and for my office.
In the midst of this pandemic, there has also been uncertainty about Daca at the same time. And I was wondering if you'd like to comment on what that's been like for you and your students.
Well, it's been since 2017, right? Since it got rescinded in 2017. And the threat of dissolving Daca, and it has been weighing on us heavily. And the uncertainty of like, hurry up and renew because we don't know how much longer you're going to have it, right? And we have to remember, it's not just students, it's alumni, people who have been in the profession, people who have been working, who have families, who have homes now, that are out there that have DACA. And so I'm also getting a group of students now that don't have DACA, because those who are, you know, came of age in 2017 who are 16 years old, they no longer can apply because it's only for renewals right now. So the decision, you know, we kept waiting, and we were expecting it's going to be rescinded. So we were hurrying up and trying to raise funds. That was my goal during COVID, was we're going to fundraise and we're going to renew DACA permits, even if they're a year away from expiring. And that was what a lot of community rights organizers, immigrant rights organizers were telling us. Just have them apply, have them renew, even if they're a year out. And they were renewing. And so I have had several students who, since 2017, just keep renewing, right? And if we're a year away, because we don't know, we want to give them the most time on the DACA permit because it protects them from being deported, because it gives them the ability to work, right? So we keep renewing. And the anxiety, I feel it. And I have protection, I have status, I'm a citizen, right? And it weighs on me. I can feel it, the heaviness of it. And every day I was like, oh my God, is this the decision day? Is this the decision day? You know, and I would wake up every day and I would be in community with students and be like, all right, let's hold on. You know, and I would send messages like, we're here, we've been here before DACA, we'll be here after DACA, there are students who don't have DACA, you know. So it was trying to reassure them, and honestly trying to reassure myself that we got this, we can do this, we've done this before. This does not define who we are as people, and, you know, and that we deserve, you know, that these students deserve to be treated as humanely as possible and given opportunities that everyone else is. So, it has been really difficult. It has weighed on us quite a bit. But the student organization, amazing. You know, I work with a phenomenal immigration attorney in Aurora. I'm gonna drop his name because he's so awesome. Everyone should know Jeremy Lime. He has been providing free legal counsel for us for years. And so I worked with him and with the student organization, and through my social media and their social media since February, we've raised over $16,000 for DACA renewal fees. I had a former DACA recipient out of New York that gave me, you know, $7,000, and she did a company match, and she said, I have this money, I see what you're doing, I see what the students are doing, and, you know, and she's like, I want this to go. And I said, not a problem. This money will cover their fees, and I have their lawyer fees covered. And so we're in the midst of renewing as many DACA permits as we can. And I also have about 6 students lined up ready to go to be first-time applicants. If USCIS finally opens the door to allow first-time applicants, which in theory they should, because the Supreme Court's ruling should go back to before it was rescinded. So they should start accepting new applicants, but they've kind of been holding off. Once they go with new applicants, we have thousands that could apply. In myself here, I've got about I think I've got 6 now that are lined up, and I'm working with Jeremy to get their folders ready, and I have their funding ready, and the second they say we're ready to go, we're just going to hit send. So yeah, that this decision is with COVID and everything else, and life and DACA is just this heaviness that weighs on us and our students.
So you and your students have already been involved in social movements for some time, but during this particular moment, there's also a national resurgence of social movements. And I wonder how that's impacted you and your students.
So it really calls on us to, the one thing about the Undocumented Student Organization and those who have been involved, and keep in mind that not every student who's undocumented is part of the student organization, because of the fact that a lot of the undocumented students are commuting, or they're working, or they're not able to be involved on campus. One student said one time, "Thank God I won all this scholarship money because that allowed me to do this." Right? Because if they had to work all the time, they wouldn't have been able to be involved in these movements that we do. But the ones that are actively involved in Dream Action, they, even as of last year, it's been quite a few years, they saw the need to advocate alongside others that were being affected, that were being oppressed, that were being discriminated against. And they were purposeful in trying to reach out to the African Student Association, to the Black Student Union, to the LGBTQ community, to Pride. And so they went and they met with their leadership and tried to do events and advocacy alongside different groups of students that were being affected by whatever, different issues or obstacles that they were facing. So this year, more so, what's been brought to our forefront is to make sure that we are honoring Black spaces, like the Black experience, and not putting ourselves in that space, and making sure that the Black students know that we're here to advocate and support alongside them, but not necessarily taking away from their issue, and calling on our own community, our other, the other immigrant communities, to face the anti-Blackness that they have in the community. And so Dream Action right now is predominantly made of Latinx students, and they're really calling out on anti-Blackness and asking students to not let comments go, and to do what they can, and not just say that they're allies and advocates alongside the Black community, but actually show up, be there, or donate, and do what they can. So that's how it's affected us. We're also my office is working with the social justice office, and we've put on a 4-part series of social justice town halls. And we are making sure that we're promoting information there about how to be a good ally, about mobilizing, about knowing your rights, and the importance of honoring our community cultural wealth, and out of ours and others.
So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about how your family has been directly affected by COVID-19.
Okay. So I have a nephew who is the certified nurse's assistant. He's lived with me since January. And his nursing home had been put on lockdown before any of the shelter-in-place orders had come through. And he was being very careful, and then someone got it, and it spread like wildfire. And he started feeling sick. It was towards the end of April, and he was feeling sick. And I remember clearly because I had my comprehensive exam due on May 1st, and that was the day he walked in. My exam was due at 5 o'clock that afternoon, 5 o'clock that day, and he walked in at 10, and he's like, "Thea, I tested positive for COVID." And up until that point, COVID was this big scary monster, right? I was so like, oh, and I remember freaking out and thinking, oh my God, my kids and my husband. I don't know. I never really thought about myself, but I remember thinking, I can't, not my kids, not my husband, right? And so we quarantined them. We're very fortunate. And this is something I think about to my childhood to now. You know, I was thinking like if my mom and dad were alive, I would have been so worried for them because they have a very small home and a lot of people and they have one bathroom. That's not my reality. We're very fortunate. We're very privileged where, you know, I could put my nephew in the basement with a bathroom and a mini kitchen and he could quarantine himself for the 14 days. And so we did that. We quarantined him. But we didn't get to him before he got my daughter sick. And so my daughter and I both ended up getting sick. We had very similar symptoms, except I kept having pressure in my sinus area. And so that was the only difference. I had that and she lost her sense of taste. Both my nephew and my daughter lost their sense of taste. And so my daughter and I didn't quarantine. We just laid in the bed together and watched movies all day because we were both super tired. We were just super exhausted. But no one else in the family got it. So while we quarantined my nephew, by the time my daughter got it, we were just like, well, because we thought my daughter and I had it. And I remember she got tested, and on Mother's Day, we were going to visit my mother's grave, and on Mother's Day, they called, and we're all in a car, mind you, no mask or anything. And they're like, your daughter has tested positive for COVID. And I was like, what? So ya estábamos ahí todos. We're like, you know, in a little Honda Civic. And remarkably, you know, we really were trying to be careful. Don't touch your face, wash your hands, clean surfaces. We did a lot of that. So, and then I do have a nephew who is a firefighter. He's a first responder. He actually ended up in the ICU. He ended up on, ¿cómo se dice? A ventilator. He ended up on a ventilator. And he was very touch and go for a minute there. And he ended up with embolisms, pulmonary embolisms, but he's okay now. And then more recently, my nephew's ex-wife, she spent 4 days in the ICU, and she just came out okay. And it was touch and go with her too. But she's in Texas. Yeah, that's how, and I guess my extended family, my comadre across the street, her mother was in a nursing home and she passed away from COVID. It's really sad though, because she was one of the earlier, in the early stages, and she was in a hospital and no one could go see her. And at the time, my comadre had been in Florida, so they got stuck in Florida, and it was only her son, who was a nurse, who was here. And so my comadre called me and asked me, could you send a rosary for my mom so she doesn't just, you know, die like that with nothing. So I actually sent her mom a rosary, and then my friend had made me a mask, and she had given me, let me see if I can show it in this video. She'd given me this card. It was a prayer card for the Virgen and for Virgin Mary, and it turned out to be a prayer that my friend and her mom said all the time, and I didn't know. There's no way I could have known. My friend sent me the card and a mask, and then I ended up sending this card and a rosary to her mom. And when my friend found out I had sent it to her, she said she couldn't thank me enough. She said, this is definitely from God. I'm like, okay, I feel like it too. So yeah, that was just my experience, you know, my fear for students who are essential workers and out there, and, you know, immigrants are now considered essential, when I just have to laugh about that. Like, who is not considered essential, you know?
So other than the quarantining and the direct exposure to COVID-19, how has your life changed in your family during the crisis?
Well, my husband and I now share a workspace. So we have a den. Other things, you know, I have teenagers. They want to be out. I have my nephew's a young adult. He wants to be out with his girlfriend. They want to be out with their friends, and trying to explain that. And like I said in the beginning, I was so scared. Like, you know, I just didn't know what to expect. Like, I thought, you know, I kept thinking, you're going to get COVID and that's it, you're dead. And then we had it, and it was like, okay, well, people have a chance, but it affects everyone differently. And so I guess my life has changed in that I'm so appreciative to have that I have a job that allows me to be home, and that I've been able to spend time with my family. If you know me, you know I'm constantly on the go, and I'm always doing something, and I didn't realize how much I was spending away from my kids and my family and my husband. And even before COVID, I had started to try to, scale back a bit, but now I'm just like, wow, it's been nice to be home with my kids and to be with them and to appreciate them. And then sometimes, I'm home with my kids. Oh my God. So it's changed in a lot of ways. Our schooling is completely different. We're looking at going back to a hybrid model. They're going to be going on Tuesdays and Tuesdays and Fridays, and maybe Wednesdays, so every elder, alternating on Wednesdays. So there's a lot of things that have changed for us. And then the fact that, I can't go visit my family as much as I'd like to. So that's how my life has changed, or be with my friends. I definitely am an extrovert, and I miss being around people, besides I have my family, but my friends and my family, my extended ones.
So you mentioned your kids going back to school. How has the support been from their school district?
Again, privilege, right? These kids have tablets. We have Wi-Fi. So it's been there. It's different for them. I think it also has to do with your personality, right? And what type of learner you are. Not everyone likes to learn in a virtual format. Not everyone does well at self-paced learning. So I think it's been different. My daughter did really well. My son, we had to push a little harder, he just didn't, it wasn't the same. And not only that, the schools were like, well, if you have this grade, you're not going to go anything lower than that grade. Well, they had A's. So what was the incentive for them to do any work, right? Because if they're not going to go anything below an A, where's your incentive? My son got a B in one class, and he still talks about it. I feel like a failure. You all make me feel like a failure because he got the B, because we're like, no. But he already had it, and he wasn't going anything lower, and he just didn't put the effort in because I felt like there wasn't much incentive for these kids. And I was going back and forth with the teachers, and they're like, well, he's done everything. I'm like, no, you're not challenging him. I really felt like they weren't being challenged. But, teenagers are like, well, I'm good. I got the A. I don't need to do anything.
So we hear a lot about healthcare and COVID-19 right now. We don't hear as much about people that are dealing with healthcare challenges that aren't related to COVID-19 in the middle of this pandemic.
Yeah.
You are an essential healthcare navigator and support system for your family. And I was wondering how COVID has complicated navigating the healthcare system for you.
So, yes, my husband has been my husband has been diagnosed with two things. One of them is what's called an acoustic neuroma, which is a tumor in his ear, and then he's been diagnosed with what's called an occipital fistula. So his brain, his arteries and veins have fused, and we have to do surgery. It has been very interesting navigating this because I'm trying to do as much as I can to take any stress off of him. I'm the power of attorney. I'm the one who's setting up his short-term disability leave. And so I'm doing all of that. Luckily, I did mention that my master's is in instructional technology. So scanning, faxing, taking PDFs, no problem. I have no problem working in portals and systems. His company has also been amazing. His support system, from his boss to his office manager to his coworkers reaching out, have been very helpful. But he works at a tech company, and they do a lot of, I don't know, it's just a whole different vibe. I don't know, I get at this tech company. My office, my boss is completely supportive as well. But with the healthcare piece, he has to go in by himself. I can get him somewhere, but then he has to enter. And right now he's not really thinking straight, and I like to be there, and I want to take notes. And so now what we're doing is we're asking doctors, can we record you? And so doctors are letting us record them so that we can then process everything together. So the times that I am able to go in, I'm the one recording, I'm the one making the appointments, I'm the one following up. But sadly, you know, we're going to be going in for a major surgery next Tuesday, and I can only be there as long as the surgery is happening. They're going to make me leave after the surgery, and he has to go to ICU on his own, and he has to stay in the hospital for 3 days, and I can't see him until I pick him up. So that's been really challenging. And the other part is, you know, when you think about someone having a surgery, you know, my sister had surgery a few years ago. She has cancer, and we were all there, like the whole family. Así somos, you know, we have to be there all together. And so we all rode in, and there was like 5 or 6 of us all, and we waited. I'm gonna have to sit there by myself for the whole time. And it's a 4-hour surgery, and maybe 5 by the time it's done, right? 5 or 6 by the time it's done. And so that piece has been complicated, but the whole time I keep telling myself how privileged we are to have this good health insurance, how lucky we are to have the people who support us. Because I'm also looking at students, and I'm helping students whose entire families have gotten sick and they don't have access to health care. You know, and reassuring them that ERs will take you. It's okay. They're not going to report you. So it's interesting as I'm helping students navigate that. And then I see how much I don't complain about what I'm getting, you know, anything that I'm up against, I'm just like, no problem. I don't complain about it. And I keep hearing people like, I can't believe you're not going to be able to have people. I can't believe. And I'm just like, you know, it's for the safety of the doctors and the other patients. And while it's not ideal for me, and I would want to be there with him, I know it's important that we take care of everyone and not just accommodate our needs. And so, yeah, I think it's been an interesting process where having to talk to doctors, understand procedures. And I think a bit of advice for anyone who watches this later on, if you're ever working in the medical profession, ask until you understand. Don't just nod your head, because they're using lingo, terminology, documents that go way over your head because that's their everyday language. But we as lay people, we don't know what they're saying. So I'm really good at asking questions out. What do you mean? Nope, I still don't understand. You know, nope, I still don't. I'm sure they're sick of me, but I ask until I understand. And I'm not taking anything for granted, not when it's my husband's life or anyone's life, and nor should we, you know, and that's the thing. Sometimes doctors are so used to speaking up here that we need to be like, hey, come down to our level and make sure that we understand everything. And yeah, so it's been interesting. I'm there. I think we're almost to, you know, the one thing too is you have all these follow-up pieces of appointments and blood work that you have to do. And again, having to navigate that. And I think about it like, how would my mom do this? You know, how would my parents do this? How would someone who doesn't speak English do this? Because not everybody is accommodating. And so then I'm like, wow, we really need like more patient advocates, medical advocates for our immigrant community. There's so many things that happen as I'm thinking about COVID. And I mean, we already knew all of this, you know, these inequities were there, but man, it just really, I feel like it's like that black light that you put on and you see all the little spots of problems, right? I feel like COVID is the black light into a dark room with a bunch of specks. And we already knew they were there, but now we're seeing them all.
So as we know, the Latinx community has been hit especially hard by this crisis. Do you have any comments about the government's response to COVID-19 in light of that?
Oh man, Dana, that's a heck of a question. They just don't care. You know, I think my response, one thing too, I live in a very privileged area. You know, again, I'm educated. My husband and I are both proud Huskies. We both have our degrees from NIU, and he's a computer programmer, and I work at the university. When I think about the government, I also think about the people in the community that I'm in, not necessarily where I work or where I organize, but where I live. And they just don't think it's a problem because it doesn't affect them, right? They don't see the need, and it's that fear that someone's taking something from you, when in fact, you know, I think about the Latinx community. They're the essential workers. They're the ones who are giving. They're the ones who are doing this work, but yet they're not getting anything back. And I don't know if you would let me read this, but I think this is a really good. I'm part of a program, a PhD cohort, and we were all doing our comprehensive exams from from January, and it was due May 1st. And it was at the midst, like right when, you know, the shelter in place went in, and when all this real super uncertainty about COVID, and we really don't know much more about it, right? And the mask, and, you know, wipe everything down. And so we were really at this heightened sense of, oh my gosh, what are we doing? What about our community members? What about our families? What about the lack of support for them from the government, right? Because the government didn't care about us. That's my reaction to when you say the government. I'm going to say this: they didn't care, and more so at the federal level. At the state level, we had some really amazing, you know, the Latino caucus was fighting for our community. They were making sure that we were all included, and so there was some advocacy happening at the state level in Illinois that I was really proud of. And so I would like to read this, if you permit me. It was a joint, let me see, ¿cómo se dice? It was a joint statement that was put in the front of all of our comprehensive exams. Truly, I want to give credit to my hermano Jesus Ruiz, because he's the one who wrote all of this, and we kind of tweaked it when needed. But it talks a little bit about what's happening as we're writing. So can I read it to you?
Sure.
Okay. So it says, our world has sunk into a public health, economic, and humanitarian crisis none of us has ever experienced before. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought unimaginable pain and suffering to the world, but in particular to the communities of color this cohort serves on a daily basis. We wrote with broken spirits and heavy hearts. We wrote working day and night, finding comfort in each other's company through a computer screen, and waiting for the day when we can hug each other again. We wrote as thousands of our brothers and sisters continue to lose their lives alone and in isolation, trusting a healthcare system that is broken, biased, and unprepared. We wrote as family members, friends, and others were left to die alone, far from that which we treasure most, our families. We wrote in the midst of uncertainty, fear, and anxiety. We wrote as messages from the pinnacle of power made a joke out of tragedy and converted ignorance into something to be revered and admired. We wrote as our Black and Brown communities are asked to stay on the job and show gratitude for putting their lives at risk. We wrote as our people pick vegetables, restock shelves, and pack meat for a country that has never seen them as essential, but disposable and replaceable. We wrote to counter the privileged white bodies that fill the streets in complete disregard for those most vulnerable. We wrote as whiteness asked for the reopening of our country, desperate for a haircut or a manicure, just as our people die and leave their children to fend for themselves. We wrote as our families went hungry, waiting for a stimulus check that did not come because they did not have papers or a bank account. We wrote as we fought to keep the fear of trauma, of what's to come away from another day. We wrote through the storm, not looking for sympathy, much less pity, but with the clear goal of fulfilling expectations to the best of our ability. We wrote, delaying our tears until Friday night. We wrote as we faced the crisis, not because we were unaffected, but because we owed it to those who will not be with us at graduation or get to see those 3 letters after our names. We write as a way to honor our people, their sacrifices, their dreams, and the hopes they leave behind. We write as a pledge to continue working for justice and equity so that they may rest in peace knowing their children will get a better chance than they ever did. With a faithful commitment not to forget the sacrifice of our people for a country that fails to recognize that it is sustained by bronze arms and backs marked with the yoke of indifference. That's our collective statement.
That's beautiful. Thank you for reading that.
No problem. Yeah, credit to Jesus. We were working on this exam and he was able to get it out. And we proofed it quickly and then we all attached it. It's written in English and in Spanish because I feel like that's our bit of ¿qué la palabra que busco? That's how we resist, right? We started it with Spanish, so whoever got our exam was going to be faced with a bunch of just, a whole page and a half of Spanish, and they're probably like, what is this? But then we translated it for them. So, yeah. Cool.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to share with me about your experiences with COVID-19 that I haven't asked you about?
I just think that we don't know what's coming yet. Like, I feel like the because what's the word I'm looking for? The effects of this pandemic are, I think, are going to be felt for a long time. I hope that something good comes from this, and that, you know, like I said, that light being shined on all these inequities that we've always known have been here. I feel like I'm seeing a lot of people who normally don't advocate, who don't normally stand up, because of the Black Lives Matters movement. You know, we talk about social stuff, we didn't actually say it, and I think it's important to say it. It was the, you know, the killing of Black bodies, and violence, police violence against, you know, the Black community, that drove thousands and thousands out onto the streets. And for the first time, to be in a march with my daughter, you know, to be alongside her and watching her hold up a sign. And it was during the, you know, we had our masks, we had our hand sanitizer, but this was something that we felt particularly strong about, and that we needed to be there in solidarity with the Black community. And so I feel like we're not going to see, you know, the effects of this for a while, but so much has changed and so much inequity is there because of COVID. And we're seeing that with, you know, our digital divide and our families that don't have access to technology or don't know how to support and advocate for themselves. So I guess one thing about COVID, I'd like to say, if, you know, and it might be too late, I don't know when these are going to be released, but please make sure to help advocate for those who, you know, and don't ever think that people don't have voices. I hate the voice for the voiceless line. Everybody has a voice. Just help amplify those voices. Make sure that, you know, you don't just care for yourself, but you care for others around you, and that you amplify those voices that need to be amplified the most.
Well, I really want to thank you, Sandy, for sharing your story with us and with future scholars and others to help them understand what it was like going through this moment in history.
Yeah, it's been interesting. Nothing, you know, I keep thinking nothing like I've ever seen in my lifetime. And I don't know, just, but yet we survived. I do want to, can I share one last thing with you?
Sure.
All right, I think you know, there's a line from a student that we were talking, and we had been sharing how we, you know, how we survive and how we do this. And we had been talking about that, but one of the things that she said to me, she said, honestly, I know COVID-19 doesn't care who we are, but we have an advantage. Everyone else has always been on survival. She said, we have an advantage because we have an advantage to everyone else because we have always been on survival mode, and other people are barely turning it on. And she was talking about the immigrant community. She's like, we're always on survival mode. And I felt like, I'm like, you're right. And that the student hasn't disappointed. Survival mode, but we know how to do it. So thanks.